And we are meeting back tonight for Sunday night lesson. I'm glad to be able to take over and continue on doing this. I've enjoyed the time that I've been able to do it, and I hope that y'all are getting to enjoy it. Where we left off at, we're talking about Joseph. We're going over different men of faith in the Bible, and we're on the last part 3 of Joseph. Where we left him off at was his brothers hated him for being the favorite son, so they went and threw him in a pit and sold him into slavery to Egypt. And then in part 2, we talked about how he was a slave, but he was doing very good as a slave. He was put over the whole house and land of the master, but then the master's wife had to come in and mess that up, lying about what he's done, or lying about trying to lie with her, and got put in prison. But from prison, he my mind just went blank. From prison, he was able to interpret a couple dreams. Remember, he's a dream interpreter, and he was able to interpret dreams for a butler and a baker. And for the butler, he was going to be restored back as the butler of the Pharaoh, but for the baker, well, he ended up being executed, just like what Joseph talked about. So, from there, he asked the butler to remember him in prison so he can get out because he's innocent, and he wanted to get out, and this is where we left off, that he was forgotten about. And before I continue, I want to give the next memory verse, which will be out of 1 Corinthians chapter 2 and verse 5. The Bible says that your faith should not stand in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. Now, this is a really good verse that you shouldn't stand in the wisdom of men, because the wisdom of man, it's faulty. It can be inaccurate. It can even be destructive or corruptive or perverted. It's not perfect. But it says that our faith should instead stand in the power of God, because the power of God is infallible. It is perfect. It's all powerful. It's the power of God. It'll always be there. God will always be there when you need Him. It may not be in the way that you expect, but still, God will never leave or forsake His children. And that's really good for our lesson tonight, and understanding about how some people in Joseph's position right now, being in jail wrongly and being sold into slavery, people, if you looked at the wisdom of man, it would show that person should have given up a long time ago, because he's just going through one sorrow after another and one bad thing after the other. But instead, Joseph is trusting. He has faith in the power of God that he will either get out, or that God will use his life however He sees fit. So that's where we're at. 1 Corinthians chapter 2 and verse 5. I want to congratulate Callie on getting these verses done. She gave me yet another one. I'm proud of you, Callie. Boys, if y'all are watching, I want y'all to try to get some memory verses. And remember, it's Hebrews 11:1, Hebrews 11:6, Proverbs 3:5 and 6, Proverbs 30 verse 5, and now 1 Corinthians chapter 2 and verse 5. Let's get those on. So, now we'll be doing most of our reading out of chapter 41 of the book of Genesis, talking about Joseph, and it starts off with saying, "And it came to pass at the end of 2 full years." Let's stop there. For 2 years, Joseph was forgot about. He asked the butler to remember him, but he forgot about him, and he was forgotten about for 2 years. How do you forget the man that interpreted your dream is still in jail for wrong reasons. And you said that you were going to help him. But you forgot about him. I just don't understand how you can forget. But anyways, after two years has went by, and the Pharaoh of Egypt, the king of Egypt, top dog of Egypt, has had a couple of dreams. And they are really, really startling him because he don't know what they mean. He doesn't understand them, and he's just, it's bugging him just because he can't make sense of them. So he goes to all the scholars in Egypt, all the magicians, all the dream interpreters of Egypt, and they have no idea how to interpret it. Because honestly, when I go into both the dreams, they are really, really weird. They make no sense. It would take the divine power of God to be able to interpret it accurately, of course, obviously. But after looking at all the people that the Pharaoh knew, and none of them knew how to interpret the dream, the butler finally remembered about Joseph. 2 years later, oh wait, I remember a guy. Back when I was in jail, there was this man that interpreted my dream that said that you'll restore me as your butler. Now, what was his name? What was it? Oh, it was Joseph. We need to look for Joseph in jail. He interpreted my dream. He can probably interpret yours too. So the Pharaoh pulled him out of the jail and cleaned him up. Got him. Well, I don't know about shaving. Maybe he had a beard. I don't know. I have a beard. I'm proud of it. So I wouldn't shave it. But he had him all cleaned up. He probably had scraggly hair. Probably stunk a little bit. Gave him a nice bath. Cleaned up his hair a little bit. So he could present himself to the Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh told him the dreams. Now let me go into these dreams. The first dream is the setting was at the riverside of the Nile River, which is called the bloodline of Egypt. That's where they had all the many fertile crops growing alongside the river. That's where they had all of the transportation of a cargo of valuables through that river. It was a very important river in Egypt, and I believe it probably still is. But he's standing at the side of the river, and there's 7 beautiful cows. They're big, fat, juicy-looking cows, and they're grazing by the riverside, like a normal day. But 7 sickly, scrawny, sickly-looking cows. You can see their ribs, and they're all nasty looking. They didn't look fit to eat at all. And these cows, 7 of them came out of the river, and they ate the good cows. Oh, that just don't make no sense. Why would a cow come out of the river? And second off, why would a cow eat another cow? But sure enough, in the dream, these 7 ugly cows ate the 7 beautiful cows. And that would be startling. But then the second dream, it kind of goes along the same line. There's 7 ears of corn in a crop that looked plentiful. They were nice and thick ears of corn, and but they were there were 7 nasty, dead looking ears of corn, and those poor ears of corn. There were 7 of them. They ate the 7 good ears of corn. And still, that makes no sense. But through God, Joseph knew what that meant. Joseph interpreted that the 7 good cows and ears of corn meant that God will bless Egypt with 7 years of plenteous harvest. That means it's all of the livestock, all the crops and harvest. It's going to be awesome for 7 years. It's going to be the best harvest, the best livestock that Egypt has ever seen of all time, ever from then and even into now. It was going to be the best harvest ever. It was going to be 7 awesome years of getting a bunch of food and being able to have good time with it. It was going to be easy. It wasn't going to be no droughts. It wasn't going to destroy the crops from a flood or nothing. It was going to be good, fertile year. That's awesome. But he also interpreted after the 7 years of plenty, it will be 7 years of famine. Now, what a famine is, that means there's a drought, and so the harvest, all the crops, it's too dry for them to grow, and for some reason the cows aren't producing milk. They're not, because there's not good crops, there's nothing good for them to eat, so the cows get sick and scrawny. And these 7 years of famine will be so bad that no one will even remember the last good 7 years. That's how bad it's going to get. It's going to turn from the best of Egypt to the absolute worst of Egypt. It's going to be bad. People would die because of this famine, because they wouldn't have anything to eat or have any kind of nourishment. And they wouldn't have anything to sell, so they wouldn't have any money. So it would just be a bad, bad time in Egypt. And Joseph tells the Pharaoh that he needs to get officers to when this time of good years start. He needs to appoint people to take over that the good crops. Go house to house, and let's see, where does it say? It says to a certain amount, but from each crop and each livestock, try to store up just a small amount from each household year after year after year after year to have a big storage, because it's going to be so good. They're going to have ears of corn falling. They wouldn't be able to keep up eating it because it would just be so good. But they're going to build these storage houses, these barns that they can store all this food in. So when it comes to the 7 years of bad time, they'll have it. They'll have what they need to survive. And this famine, it's not just going to be in Egypt, but it's going to be all over the world. No, nothing's going to produce anywhere. And so the Pharaoh's hearing this, and he's thinking, yeah, that's a very good idea. I need to find someone with good management skills and a good work ethic to be able to take care of getting all these barns set up to store all this food and prepare for the bad times. And Joseph said, yeah, that's a very good idea. And the Pharaoh said, Joseph, I like you so much, I am going to put you over that job. And Joseph is like, what? I'm a slave. I'm in jail. You don't want, or do you really want me? And the Pharaoh likes him so much that not only is Joseph put over that operation, but he makes Joseph the second man in command over all of Egypt. So he is the number 2 man The only person above him is the Pharaoh. So he has went from rags to riches. He has went from being in jail to being royalty. And of course, this is my wedding ring, but the Pharaoh even gave Joseph his special ring of royalty, saying, he gave it to him and said, now you are royalty, now you are a man of power in Egypt, and I want you to take care of these storehouses and get them stored up and prepared for the 7 bad years. So I guess I can continue on. They get these built, and it was such a success that in the 7 years of bad famine, everyone all over the world is going in to buy food from Egypt. Because the storages that Joseph built, they were so successful that they still had too much food and was able to sell it, to disperse it amongst people. And guess who got to go and take part of that? That would be the family of Joseph. So they went all the way from where they were. I don't remember exactly where they were, but they went, well, I guess Canaan, I guess you can say. But they went all the way from where they were living to Egypt, which would be like a trip from the state of Maine to the state of Arkansas. That was a very long trip, and not just for in a car, but they were on donkeys, they were on mules. They didn't have anything for fast travel. They just had to walk all the way up there just to buy food. And all the brothers except the youngest brother of the group, which is at the time Benjamin, had to go up there. He didn't get to go, but the rest of the brothers went to go get the food. And Joseph saw them and instantly knew that's who they were. Of course, they didn't know because he was robed in the Egyptian royalty. Of course, they didn't know that he would even still be alive. So eventually, Joseph confronts them and shows compassion to them, and is able to bring his father Jacob up into Egypt, and all of their family move into Egypt, and it's a happily ever after story for them. So Joseph went from being the hated runt to the top slave, and then went from the slave to be in jail, and now from jail to be one of the highest men in the nation of Egypt. So that's, through all of that, it would have been so easy for Joseph to just give up. And a lot of times when things get hard for us, we may try to take things our own way, or we may just want to give up altogether, but don't give up. You may not understand what God is letting you go through, but you think Joseph understood? Now let's remember back in the beginning of part 1, Joseph had those dreams of his family being under him and bowing to respect Joseph. And just so happens, he becomes the number 2 man in Egypt, and they are bowing and respecting Joseph. That's just awesome how things played out. And none of that could have happened if it were not for the faith of Joseph. So let's have faith like Joseph in those times that seem like nothing's going right. Just what it says in 2 Corinthians 2:5 and Proverbs 3:5 and 6. Don't trust in what you might know, but trust instead in the power of God. Well, I guess that's all I have. That is the story of Joseph, and I hope you're able to gain something out of it. So I guess that's all I got. I'll pray and I will close us out. Lord, I want to thank you for this day you've given us. Thank you for allowing us to be able to have this time to be able to study your word, Lord, and just look at all these different men that were faithful, Lord, like Joseph. How he went through trial after trial, but at the end he went through a mountaintop of a reward because of his faithfulness, Lord. And I just pray that you help each one that listens to this, Lord. I just pray you help us to remember to stay faithful in your word and stay faithful in our walk with you, Lord. That in these times and storms of life that we're able to stay close with you. Please be with each kid that listens to this tonight, Lord. I pray that you help them to be lights, shining lights in their communities, Lord. And I pray most if there be any that are not saved, help them to come to know you before it's everlasting too late. Lord, I pray that most of all through these lessons that we're able to honor and glorify you with our lives. I pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, well, I hope everyone has a great week. I'm already missing y'all, and I'm ready to see y'all next week.